working with people. Oh, whoops.
Sorry, we're just recording.
You want me to say all that all over again now, Dave?
Again. No, thanks, Joe. I was going to say quickly, some bit of room for questions would be nice as well.
Oh, sure, absolutely. But I'll talk for a little bit, give a little background, and then we'll just have a conversation. How's that sound?
Perfect. Sorry, Joe. Sorry to interrupt you.
No problem, Dave. So where was I? So anyway, so I spent much of my 20s searching in other strategies, techniques, going to workshops, retreats, and they were all about coping mechanisms, ways to help you, kind of like having a really leaky canoe, filling up with negative emotions and getting a really good bucket to bail it out on a daily basis, but not seeing how to seal up the canoe so it didn't leak, so it stayed afloat. And so I got really good at running every day and getting up and writing in my journal and meditating and going to support groups and doing all kinds of things to kind of just keep me afloat, to keep me from totally burning out. But then when I was about 33 years old, at the urging of my dear friend Keith Blevins, I attended a talk that Sydney Banks gave at the University of Miami Medical School. And I didn't really know about Sid Banks much. Keith would tell me about it. Oh, he's going to change psychology. And I thought, oh boy, what drugs have you been doing? And I just was skeptical about, because I'd seen so many things say, this is the panacea, this is the thing that's going to change everything. And I'd just grown cynical. I just didn't really believe that there really was anything. But for some reason, when he asked me this time, it triggered a response in my heart. I felt something pulling me to go to this conference, and it didn't hurt that it was in Florida in the winter of Minnesota, which is very cold where I live. And it didn't hurt that he said, by the way, there's this woman we want you to meet, to introduce you to. And I was looking for the woman, the perfect woman to make me happy. So those two things, plus this kind of just almost unconscious magnetic pull to go, got me there. But I had no idea what I was in for. I had no idea what would happen, that it would completely change and turn upside down, put on its head all the education, all the training and learning I had done the previous 10 years or more, reading thousands of books, just immersing myself in psychology. And everything I heard that weekend from Sydney Banks, kind of one by one, it kept pulling the pins out from this well-constructed intellectual belief system that I had. And it just left me destroyed in a sense of everything I thought was true. Everything, all the theories that I'd been taught, all the techniques I'd used. And so part of me wanted to just run the hell out of there, just get out of there as fast as I could. But the other part of me was so pulled in, was so drawn to this quiet, uneducated man who was speaking from his heart in a way that connected to my heart. And it calmed me down. It quieted my mind in a way that I began to get a pinprick of light into my heart that was pretty dark, pretty negative, pretty anxious, pretty fearful. And I got a feeling of lightheartedness. I felt, how you felt when you were a little kid before you got your head all full of all kinds of stuff, and you just would play, and you could play endlessly with your friends or in nature, and you just didn't have a care in the world. That was the feeling I dropped into when I was listening to Sid. But again, in my head, it was going against everything that I had so carefully constructed and built with my intellect. And so I had a dual reaction. I wanted to run out of the room, and I was drawn in. Now, at the same time, this young gal that my friend Keith introduced me to, I fell in love with when our eyes met that day, that first day. So I didn't know what hit me because I was falling in love. And by the way, I'm still married to her now after since 1980. So that's 41 years. It's so far so good. It's working out. And so I didn't know if it was just because I was falling in love or I was hearing something that was really truthful, but I didn't really care because I was feeling so good. And then I came back to Minneapolis afterwards, where I live, and had a private practice, a very successful, booming private practice. And I went to see my clients, and I had no idea what to do or say anymore. It was like everything I had been doing, I couldn't do it anymore. It hurt to say the old words. I would try to take people back in their past, and part of me knew this was just the wrong direction. Once I saw and heard even a little bit of what Sid Banks was saying, I couldn't go backwards. I couldn't go back to what I'd been doing. I tried. I just couldn't do it. I had heard too much. So little by little, I began sharing with my clients what I was seeing for myself and how my stress levels were evaporating. My burnout was gone within a matter of weeks. And they would say, God, you look different, you feel different. What's going on with you? And I would try to explain a little about the three principles. Well, it has something to do with our thinking, and that we all have this wisdom inside, and that we're all born with it, and you can't destroy it. And if we listen to that, it guides us back to mental health. And I'd say a few things like that, and they'd look at me and they'd say, God, why didn't you tell us that before? We've been counseling with you for years, and it's all been going back into the past and working through our childhood and beating pillows and doing all these things. Why didn't you tell us before? I said, well, if I'd known what I know now, then I would have told you this then, but I didn't. And so my clients and I kind of leapfrogged each other. And from their insights and their changes, it helped me to see the validity and the power and the truth of the principles. People were getting well and graduating from counseling, and before they would never graduate. They'd be clients forever. You got to be in therapy the rest of your life because you have all these issues you have to work through again and again and again. And so I found what I was looking for when I first had that desire to help other people and to become a therapist. I found a way to actually guide people back to their wisdom, the source of mental health, resilience, and true well-being. And that led me to a career that I could never have imagined possible, that I would start an institute, a mental health center, train other therapists. I've now written 6 books. I was told not by my high school guidance counselor, I saw him the other day. I hadn't seen him since high school. And I said, when I was in high school, the counselor there told me I shouldn't go to college because I had very poor verbal skills. And here I am now. I've written 6 books and I make my living being a public speaker. So that potential was inside of me all along, but it was so constrained with fear and insecurity, which is all thought. And it just released me to not only find my own mental health, but be able to guide many other people. And it's, as Dave said in the introduction, it has given me opportunities beyond my wildest dreams. I worked at the University of Minnesota Medical School for a few years doing a program called the Inner Life of Healers. The scientists were seeing that the state of mind of the nurse and the doctor had a big impact on healing, and so they sponsored this program. and myself and a psychiatrist and another person did retreats and programs, and that led to working in lots of different hospitals, and eventually into working with the Mayo Clinic, in a series of happy coincidences that I ended up helping the physicians and the nurses there through retreats and programs that we did to teach them about burnout prevention and stress reduction and career renewal. So it's been a really blessed life. I feel very fortunate that I've found something in myself that's in each of you as well. That is something that we can count on, that's always been there, that little still voice inside of us when you're curious, when you're open, when you make a wish, when you finally give up, quit trying the way you've been doing, that it creates a space, this humility, this openness, this willingness that allows that inner voice of truth and wisdom and insight to pour through your own mind. You've all heard it. You wouldn't be at this retreat if you didn't listen to that voice. That's the voice of your true self. That's the voice of your essence. And as I listen to that and you listen to that more, we're guided to this dream of a life that we always knew was possible, but we always got in our own way innocently because of the limited and insecure thinking that we've had. So it's totally innocent. No one in here has done anything wrong. There are no bad people. You're just people like me who looked outside to finding the right mate, to being successful, to getting good grades, or whatever goals that you've had, thinking if I just did that, then I'd be happy. If I just did that, then I would like myself. If I just did that, I could feel contentment. But it's not out there. Happiness isn't out there. Happiness is already there, complete and whole within you right now. So that's kind of what all my books are about. I just wrote another book that is coming out in the UK December 9th, I think. It's called Thriving in the Eye of the Hurricane. And I wrote that at the beginning of the pandemic last year. We were shutting everything down, and we were all going into lockdown here as well as in the UK. And it was very frightening. We didn't know what we were heading into. We didn't know how. There was no vaccine. We didn't know what we were going to do to stop this. The economy just sank. Travel stopped. I quit seeing people in person. This is your first retreat. You guys know what I'm talking about. There were no retreats. There was no conferences. It was all done virtually. And so all of our lives got turned upside down. Our economies got turned upside down. Then the level of fear rose, and with that fear, there was a lot of division in our politics and division in our families and division, the pro-vax and anti-vax and, conservatives, liberals, religious, non-religious, all of these conflicts and divisions. And I knew that the principles and would bring people's resilience out. People understanding the principles would bring the resilience out, because I'd seen evidence of it all over the world in every possible type of application, working with police, working with hospitals and healthcare professionals, working with school teachers, counseling parents, counseling couples, working with little kids, big kids, the elderly, working with firefighters, working in all these different arenas, that when people understand how their experience, their psychological experience of life, their feelings is coming from the inside out, not coming from circumstances and situations in our life. And that gave people like a psychological vaccination to deal with the stressors of our turbulent times that we're in. So I wrote a book that's just kind of a handbook about how the mind works, what is the nature of resilience, and how do we transform? How do we keep evolving and growing to our true nature, our true self? And then I tell scores of stories illustrating the power of the principles and just how practically it works in real life situations, in poverty, in violence, in addiction, those types of things. So that's what I've been doing a lot of speaking about the new book, because I just think that the world really needs a shift in consciousness. Unless there's a shift in consciousness, which is simply that we're more aware of where our experience is coming from, the more conscious we are that we're the creators of our moment-to-moment psychological reality, the more that we see that, the more that we're not as affected by external circumstances and situations. We realize that the peace that we're looking for is already inside. And the only thing that keeps us from experiencing that resilience is our thinking innocently in the moment. So it's a simple message. It's a simple understanding, but it's having, just this week, I did a podcast called Seeing Beyond Our Differences. And Jenny and Dave, you probably know Judy Sedgman. She was on there. Jerry Williams, who was a police officer working in one of the highest murder rate counties in the United States, Oakland, California. And he transformed that community that had an average of 1 murder per day. Not exaggerating, 1 murder per day, to no murders for the next 10 years after they did the program, he and Beverly Wilson Hayes, where they taught these principles to the residents and to the police. And so he was on the program. Judy Sedgman, who's done lots of work with conflict resolution with corporations, and then Mavis Karn, who's done a lot of work with youth, with kids in prison, gangs, a lot with the gangs in Minneapolis. And so they shared their stories, and it was just so powerful to hear the simplicity of knowing this, how it can lower the tension, create an atmosphere where people can treat each other with respect and listen to one another so we can see past our differences. Just one quick story Judy told that I really loved. She said where she lived in Florida, when she moved in there, the neighbor said, you've got a dog? Well, be sure when you walk your dog, don't walk near this woman's house, because she's a real crabby person. She'll scream and yell at you if you get anywhere near her yard, and just stay away from her. And so Judy heard that, and it was kind of made her head cock. And so first day, of course, the first thing the dog does when they want to get outside is, pee in somebody's yard. And so the dog made a beeline towards this lady's yard. And sure enough, she comes running out the door. Get that damn dog out of my yard. No, you're going to ruin the color of the lawn. And started screaming. And Judy thought, oh, she really is a crab. This woman is awful, and her shield went up. And she, felt defensive. And then she said, it has just occurred to me, she said, this is the little voice of wisdom in her, said, wow, she must be in a lot of pain to be that angry. That must be horrible to live in those feelings all the time. So she had this empathy for this woman. And then the next thought that occurred to her out of wisdom was, she asked her, she said, have you ever had a dog or a pet? And the woman stopped yelling, and she said, yes, I had a little dog. He was my best friend, because my husband had just died 2 months before that, and that doggy was my only friend, and it just destroyed my life. And Judy reached over and grabbed her hand and said, excuse me, I am so sorry for your loss. I know losing a dog can be like losing a family member. Sometimes it's even worse. They just love you unconditionally. And the woman just started sobbing, and then she quickly ran back in the house. So the next day, Judy walked by her house with her dog in the morning because the dog needed to go. And the woman came out of the house and she had something, and she said, "Would you like some blueberry muffins? They're still hot. I just made them. They'd go really good with a fresh cup of coffee." And Judy says, "Well, thank you so much. Yes, I'd love your..." And so she went back in her house and ate the muffins, and then she wrote her a note and thanked her for her kindness. "Will you be my friend?" she said at the end. And after that, they were friends. And about a year later, the woman moved out of the neighborhood, and her daughter was there gathering her belongings, and came up to Judy and said, Are you Judy?" And she said, "Yes." She said, "Well, my mom said you were her only friend. She loved you. That changed my mom." So that's when we see beyond our own prejudice, our own beliefs, because we recognize it's our thinking that's giving us the feeling, not what we're thinking about. It drops our shield, and we can connect to one another. We can have a connection that will break down barriers of race, of negative emotions, of prejudice. It will help us to connect with one another. So that story to me is an illustration of the power of this understanding that you guys are learning on this retreat, that will not only change you, but it'll change those around you, because you will see them differently. And that's really powerful. So anyway, I'll end my little talk with that and just open it up to a conversation.
That was beautiful. Thanks, Joe. Thank you, mate.
Dave. Thank
So-
you, mate. I love it when you say that, Dave. Thank you, mate. That's not a term we use here.
I loved it when we were in South Africa and we were with Joe and Michael, Joe's wife is called Michael. Michael and I loved each other. Like, I loved Michael, and Michael and I really kind of connected. We could not understand a bloody word each other said. It's like Michael would say, what accent's Michael?
She's from Arkansas, the southern part of the United States. She has a southern accent.
She's got a southern accent. I'm like, what did Michael say? And then Michael's like, what did Dave say? It was beautiful. Yeah. I didn't even know I had an accent till I got into this game. But no, I'd like to open this up. Has anybody got any questions for Joe? There's a very quiet room here, mate.
Joe, I've got a comment to make about...
Can I just ask 1 second? Joe, can you hear my sister speaking?
I think so.
Can you speak up a little bit, Lisa?
Yeah, hi Joe, I'm Lisa, I'm Dave's sister.
Oh, hi, Elise.
How you doing? And I have somebody in my family who suffered severely from addiction, alcohol addiction, and I read your book, The Serenity Principle, and it was, they never actually read it, but it was so good for me to read it as a sort of family member. And I just wanted to thank you for putting that energy out into the world and sharing it with people, because you probably write those books and you have no idea the people that they reach. And I just wanted to say thank you, and that it's a fantastic book, and I have recommended it to people and will continue to do so. It was brilliant. So
Oh,
nice.
thank
And
you.
also, I realise you have a lot to do with Gulf Breeze in California as well. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, I've helped design their program and train their staff there.
Yeah, because I looked quite deeply into Gulf Breeze at the time, and yeah, I just wanted to say, fantastic. How do you?
Well, that was my first book, and like I said, I was told not to go to college. My writing skills were bad, and when I was 40 years old, I'd been learning the principles then, maybe 9, 10 years by then, and I was given a talk. A lot of the people there were counselors from Hazelden, a treatment center in Minnesota, which was the first inpatient hospital in the world, I think, for addiction. And anyway, I was giving this talk, and after my talk, this guy came up to me, and he said, my name's Tom Grady. I own a small publishing house in Minneapolis, and I would really love to have you write a book about what you're talking about in the class here." And I said, "Oh no, you got the wrong guy. I don't write. I hate to write. I'm a terrible writer, blah, blah, blah." And he says, "No, you've got really good ideas. Just, I'll help you. I'll help you with it. I'll get an editor for you." And I said, "Oh, well, I'll think about it, and I kind of grumbled away, but then it just would not get out of my mind. And Sid once told me, he says, "You're going to help alcoholics all over the world." And so, in spite of my personal thinking, I sat down. I said, "Okay, I'm going to give it a shot." And so I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning, like writers are supposed to do. And I went in the other room. I left my wife in bed, and I went in the other room, and I sat down, and for 2 hours, I tried to write, and nothing would come. So I came back to bed with my tail between my legs and said to Michael, "God, I'm not good. This is ridiculous. I'm never going to be able to write this book." And she says, "Well, what were you writing about?" And I said, "Well, I was writing the introduction." She says, "Well, why were you writing the introduction?" I said, "Well, isn't that what you're supposed to write first? You write an outline and the introduction, and then you write chapter 1." And she says, "Well, why don't you just write what you feel inspired to write?" And I said, "Oh, that never occurred to me." And then so I went back. I left the bed and went back in the other room. And I sat down and I just started writing. And I could not stop writing. My hand cramped from writing. I wrote 18 pages on this is before laptops. And so I wrote out 18 pages, and I brought it back to bed and read it to Michael, and she said, "This is really good." I said, I don't even know if it made any sense. I just started writing, and it just started coming. And I couldn't stop. My hand ached, and I still couldn't stop. And she says, "That's where you need to write from." And so anyway, so I wrote that book, and he was going to publish it, but then he faded out of the picture. And I was giving a talk at the State Conference on Addictions Counselors program, and the head of the publication department at Hazelden, the largest publisher in the world of addiction books, came up to me with a check and a contract and said, "We heard you're writing this book, The Serenity Principle, and we want to publish it." I said, "You're kidding me." She said, "No." And so I said, "Okay." And furthermore, we're going to make it the book of the year. We're going to put it on the front of the catalog. We're really excited because all the counselors that have gone to your trainings, their burnout's gone, and they're helping people so much more. And whatever you're doing, we want to get on that bandwagon. I said, "Wow." And this is a 12-step rigid program. Hazelden is like the Vatican of addiction. It's the bishops and the Pope and everything are there. And I said, "Are you sure?" And they said, "Yeah, and so I'd go out there and meet with them, and it was all done, finished the book. And I thought, God, I better go out and meet with the founder and director of Hazelland, because this could be really controversial. So I got a meeting with Dr. Anderson, and I came in his office, and he says, well, didn't you get my email? And I said, or our letter. And I said, no, I what do you mean? And he says, well, we're not going to publish your book after all. I said, you're not? After I finished it, and it's supposed to come out in 3 weeks, he says, we sent out review copies to all of our counselors, and they're pretty hardcore AA. And 40 of them said they would quit en masse if we published your book. And I thought, my heart just sunk. I was just like, why did I go through all of this to happen? And so I looked at him and I said, well, what did you think? He said, I loved your book. It's just 20 years ahead of its time, and we can't afford to lose 40 counselors. I said, okay, so you can keep the advance. I said, okay. Wasn't that much, but that was at least some token of my efforts. So I called the guy who had originally asked me to write it. And I said, Tom, this is what happened. And he says, well, since I've talked to you, my company got bought out by HarperCollins, Harper and Row, the largest publisher in the world. And I'm now the editor-in-chief of the Psychology and Spirituality division. We'll publish your book. It sells books when they're controversial. I said, wow. So I ended up with the #1 publisher in the world, and I didn't think I should go to college because I can't write. So this is the kind of things that happen. So I wrote that book, and I have heard from more people about that book than all my other books put together. Because when something you write saves a life, because alcoholism is a terminal disease, if untreated, if unabated, it's fatal. And so people all the time write me and say, this book saved my life. This last weekend, I was given a talk about my new book at the Recovery Church in St. Paul. And this woman in a wheelchair, Native American woman, came up, said, I'd like to say something at the end of the meeting. She said, when I read that, when I was in prison and I tried to commit suicide again and got arrested for drugs, blah, 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 I was really at the lowest point in my life, and someone handed me your book and said, just read this, and see if it helps. And she said, once I read your book, she said, I got hope, and I quit identifying with my alcoholism, and I started identifying with my health, with who I am. And I haven't drank since. And my whole life is just about helping other people. And so I hear that a lot, and I don't take it personally. It's just, it feels good to hear that, but I know it's the power of the understanding that helps people. And it's not, because, like I'm writing a book, I'm not like personally writing the book. It feels like it's coming through my personality, but it feels like it's just inspiration coming through. And the more I get out of the way, the more pure that inspiration is. So, so thanks for that. But I just wanted to tell you that little story because it really illustrates that we can go way beyond what we think we can do. It certainly has for me. Yes, you had your hand up.
Thanks for that, Joe. Who had the hand up?
Yeah, right in the middle of the room, right there. There, she's standing.
Yeah. He's called.
Thank you.
Oh, Barry.
Oh,
this is Barry the book.
Hi, Joe. A little bit about a book first off. I just want to thank you for slowing down to the speed of life. You wrote with Richard Carlson, because at the beginning of our very first lockdown, 2 years ago, I actually read that book and I did slow down. I had to slow down, obviously, because of that, but I obviously needed it, and I really got that message, and I've since shared that with other people. But I also wanted to just congratulate you on your podcasts as well, and make everyone in the room aware of your podcasts. I came across them on Spotify, and obviously I know the theme of them is the new book as well. You know, so some of the podcasts are part of the new book, but they've been very instrumental in my own raising of my consciousness over the last couple of weeks. So thank you.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. Thank you. You never know how people are gonna be changed by this or be affected by. I love doing the podcasts. So far, I've just been interviewing all the people who I interviewed for the book, but I'm gonna start interviewing people who've read the book when it comes out next week here. So I'll just be interviewing people to have them tell me how the book helped them, how it changed their life. And so hey, keep coming to the podcast, and if you can come live, that would be great. We do it on I think it's on Facebook Live and YouTube, but it's also on Zoom. If you just go to my website, you can sign up for them and get notice.
Thank you.
I think the next one I'm going to do is with a woman in Nepal who was in charge of emergency preparedness. And Jenny, you know who Mahima, Dave, you know Mahima, right?
Yeah, Mahima Shrestha.
Yeah, Shreth. And I haven't got it confirmed from her if she can do it then, but she and another woman, the woman I was just on her training program an hour or so ago from Mexico, who works with coaches from all over the Spanish-speaking world in Spain and Latin America, Central America, and to talk about how this is going out in the world. Now, Jenny and Dave have done so much work in South Africa, and I don't know where else you guys have gone, but this is really going out in the planet in so many ways. And so I want to share that part of this. You know, some of them have been about addiction, others have been about how this is going out in education, school systems, inner cities, prisons. Jacqueline Hollows and her team on an earlier one, but they're all recorded and you can see them on YouTube or on my website.
Cool. Thanks, Joe.
Kelly.
Kelly.
Yeah. Hi.
Kel, speak up.
Kelly.
Hi. So I've been around quite a lot of addicts in my life, and I was just wondering if there's a piece of advice you give about being in the family of addicts. How can you support them? Because in my experience, that the addict's behaviour affecting other family members, and how you negotiate that space. You know, because they've got a need to behave, to do certain things to get the drugs that they want, and how it affects other members of that family, and what's the best way to support that? How do you negotiate that? Does that make sense?
Did you hear that, Joe?
I could hear her, yes. Yeah, so, well, I understand that I have a lot of alcoholism in my family. And I have a sister who has had 35 treatments, still drinking. And I've been able to help a lot of alcoholics, but I haven't been able to help my sister. And so I know that feeling where you feel powerless over seeing someone you love and care for destroy themselves and their lives, and of course negatively impact the lives of everyone around them, because alcoholism is a family system problem, illness, if you will. It affects everyone. And for the codependent, the person who is in relationship with someone with an addict, my advice is always to first of all remember that no one has the power over your own mind but you, unless you believe they have the power over your own mind. Then you give up your power. But when you can recognize that the power of your experience comes from the power of your mind and your use or innocent misuse of your power to think and to create your perceptions and your feelings and your psychological reality comes from within you. And that when you are able to recognize your thinking, just like Judy did in the story earlier, when she saw her shield go up and all the judgment she had about that person. And when she saw that as her thinking, it fell down, and she was able to connect with that person on a deeper level with empathy. And that helped that person settle down. And so if you try to change, what codependency is all about is that you're always trying to change the alcoholic. If you can just get them to quit drinking, or if you can get them to change, then you'd be okay. And as long as you're in that dynamic, you're going to sink down with them. But when you can, like a drowning person, if you can stay on dry land and throw them a life ring, but not jump in the water with them, you're going to maintain your own mental health, for one thing. And then you have a fighting chance of helping them, because when you lose your sanity, your mental health, because of their addiction, then it's the blind leading the blind. You're in the problem with them, and then it becomes controlling, trying to control their behavior, or blaming them for your ill feelings. And as long as you give up your power, you're feeding your own addiction to thinking that they have to change for you to feel okay. So a lot of us in the helping professions come from alcoholic families because we're always trying to save people. That's kind of our unconscious motivation. If we can just help other people, we'll feel better about ourselves. So I became addicted to caring for other people and needing other people to feel needed by me, that they needed me. That was my drug. That was how I got high, was if I could help someone. If someone would say, oh, that helped me so much. That was my drug. So that's very common with people who grow up as children of an alcoholic or spouse of an alcoholic, is to get into rescuing or getting good feelings from trying to control other people. So the first thing you have to do is get help for yourself and learn to swim so you don't drown with them. And once you learn to swim and you don't engage with the addict, it shifts the dynamic in your relationship, and it makes room for them to kind of see themselves in the mirror. Because if they don't have you to blame, because you're always on my case, you just keep telling me to quit drinking, get off my back, blah 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 blah. They can then, that if you quit doing your end of it, it creates a different dynamic that can sometimes lead to an insight. I realize, God, I have a problem. I need to get help. Not always, but either way, you're able to deal with life from your own power to create your own experience of life. And that's not denial. You still see what you're dealing with. You're still dealing with reality, but you're not blaming other people or circumstances for the quality of your experience. And that's the cure for codependency for family members. We have a free conference on addiction that, if you go to my website, a year ago we did with people from all over the world. And it's a 2-day conference that will always be available for free. And one of the presentations is on the family members. It's a father of a kid with alcoholism, several different family members talking about how their understanding of the principles helped them relate to the addict in a way that was healthier for them and allowed them to maintain hope and be there for, and a lot of amazing stories were told in that. So I would refer you to it's called the Three Principles in Addictions Conference, International Conference. Hopefully that was that helpful at all?
Very helpful. Yeah, it's really helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Cheers, Cal. Anybody else?
How about either of you, Dave or Jenny? Do you have a question or a comment or?
One sec, Joe.
If no one else has a comment, do you or Jen have a comment or?
Yeah, I was going to ask if no one in the room's like got to meet Sid, and I've been asking people sometimes when we do webinars and things, have you got a favourite story, or is there a moment that you shared with Sid? 'Cause I know that you got to spend time with him.
Yeah.
It's just been really nice to sort of bring him to life as a man, but also just different times you spent with him. So if anything like that occurs to you, I spoke to a few people.
Can you shoot the camera over there so I can see Jen?
It's quite dark. We turned the lights down so we can see you better.
I could stand up.
Here she is.
Hello.
Hi, Mama.
To be.
Huh?
Mama to be.
Well, I'm just preparing you, getting you ready for the tour. So you asked about Sid.
Yeah, just I know you got to spend time with him, and I think it's interesting in the UK. There's not many people that actually got to meet him and spend time with him.
Yeah.
And when we stayed with you, you told us a few stories about different things.
Yeah. Did we?
Frozen.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, you're back.
Frozen there. Okay. Yeah. No, I'm happy to share some stories. I number one, I just feel like I hit the lottery. When I met Sid Banks, the mental health lottery, because he really, truly was the source of bringing in a new paradigm for the mind and mental health and addictions and the whole human experience into the world. And it was a very unlikely person to bring it in. It was a man uneducated. I think he had a 9th grade education. He worked in a factory as a welder, and but he was kind of seeking in a way. He was at a retreat, and he was always, he was really into martial arts. I don't know if you guys, Jen and Dave, knew that he had a black belt in karate. He loved to watch his favorite show on TV was Kung Fu. That David, whatever his name was, the actor, did this is back in the 60s.
Carnegie.
Yes. Yeah. Somebody recognizes that. That's good. Yeah. I'm not the oldest person in the room, maybe, or the only old person in the room. But anyway, so Sid he was open to things, but he wasn't, he didn't read a lot of books or anything like that. And he was a pretty unhappy guy. He was very angry. He had a really bad temper. People at work loved to tease him and set him off and watch him explode, and they'd play tricks on him and stuff like that. And so he had a story. He was born in Scotland, and his parents gave him up. So he was adopted, and treated very poorly by his step-parents. At least he thought he was treated very poorly by them. And he ran away from home when he was young and joined the Navy, the British Navy, at age 16. I think he lied about his age and got into the Navy, and to escape, And so he was a troubled soul, but he was looking for a way out of this misery. And he was at this retreat, and I don't know if you all have heard the story or not, so if I'm repeating it, I'll stop. But those of you who haven't heard it, it's kind of interesting. So
No, keep going.
So he's walking along with this psychologist on the beach at this retreat, and Sid's going over and over his childhood and talking about how miserable he was and this and that, and how insecure a person he is. And the psychologist said, "Well, Sid, don't you realize you're not really insecure? You just think you are." And it hit. Sid said, and I quote, he said, "It hit me like a bolt of lightning when he said that." He says, did you just hear what you said, sir? And he says, "Well, of course I did. I said it, didn't I?" He says, "Well, if that's true, that means everything in our human experience is a thought." He says, "Well, I wouldn't go that far." Back to Sid. And it just hit Sid. And it just turned his world inside out, upside down. And he left that retreat and he came back to where he lived on this island in Salt Spring off the coast of British Columbia. And he went through a transformational experience, a spiritual awakening, you could call it. And he was just sitting in his easy chair in the living room, and he looked out on the bay there, and there was boats going by. It was a beautiful scene. And he said, "I felt like I got sucked into this tunnel." It was like kind of like a near-death experience that people have reported. It's like, he said, "I felt like I got sucked into this tunnel of light, and I felt so at peace. I didn't physically die, but I like died psychologically or whatever." And he said, he said the room was just a blaze of light, and it was buzzing, and it was the most beautiful feeling I'd ever experienced. And so a little while later, his wife came in the room, and Barb looked at him and said, "What happened to you? What's wrong?" He says, "I'm home, pet. I'm home. I found home." And she thought he'd flipped out or something. What is he talking about? "Sid, are you all right?" And she thought his brother-in-law was a psychiatrist and tried to get him committed. I don't know if you knew that, Dave, because they thought he'd lost his mind. And because his personality completely changed. His physical presence changed. The next week, he went back to work after being on vacation, and he had his uniform on with his name tag and all that. And the guard at the gate says, "What are you doing with Scotty's name tag and uniform?" He says, "No, it's me. It's Scotty." That's what they called him there, Scotty, because he's from Scotland. And he says, "No, it's me. It's Scotty." No, you're not Scotty. You don't look anything like Scotty. Because his face had all the wrinkles, all the anger, all of the insecurities just went out of him. And it was just this peaceful person. So finally, he says, "Look, ask me anything about my family or whatever." It's like grilled him. He says, "Oh, well, God, what happened? You must have inherited money or something." Being a Scotsman, he would think money would do it. And he says, "No, I didn't inherit any money." And he says, so he didn't know what to make of it. And so the guys that would normally tease him and get him to react didn't know what to do with him at work. And so they put him down in the dungeon. They call it the dungeon, which was in the basement where there were all these pipes, and there was this big burly guy that worked down there alone, and no one could work with him because he was so angry and such a pain in the tushka to work with. So they put Sid down there with him, and they thought, we'll get Sid back. Joe Blow or whatever his name was, he'll bring him back. And so after he had worked down there for about a week, nothing got to Sid. It didn't bother him, and the other guy changed. The guy that was the crabby guy that was no one could work with, he transformed from hanging out with Sid for a week. And so they just didn't know what to do. And so they they ended up promoting him to be the foreman. And they kept promoting him because he was so wise. And this went on for, I don't know, 6 months to a year. And then Sid realized, this isn't my purpose. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to quit. So he just quit his job. He had a great job. All of a sudden he had no income. He didn't know how he was going to make a living. And he just went back home and he just started living his life. And he, pretty soon people started showing up at his doorstep for what they didn't even know why. They just said, I'm really got problems. I heard you can help people. And he said, you did? So he'd talk to these people with mental illnesses and addictions and all kinds of problems, and it would heal them just with a conversation with Sid. And so after a while, he started doing talks at the church, and it just kind of grew. And then psychologists and psychiatrists heard about this, that there was this phenomena happening on that island, and it was changing the people around who listened to Sydney Banks. So there was a grant from the National Institute of Mental Health in America that was looking for breakthroughs in mental health treatment. And they had a grant, and a very well-known psychologist named Dr. John Enright was involved with that. And he got wind of Sid Banks, heard about it, and sent George Pransky to go investigate it. And so George and his wife went to Salt Spring, and I think Roger Mills went too, and just kind of hung out there and interviewed people and to find out what was going on. And it really changed them dramatically. They just saw all these miracles happening, because there was a lot of the big hippie movement at that time, and with a lot of kids on drugs and stuff, and a lot of people's lives changed. And so that's how it got into psychology. So they came back and they started teaching as best they could the 3 principles, and and it's just evolved since then. But that's how it all began. But Sid, I was really lucky, because when Chris Heath and I started the Minneapolis Institute of Mental Health, Sid was our mentor, our consultant. And every week he would talk to the staff and to Chris and I and help us get our grounding in understanding the principles, because it was completely the opposite of everything that we'd been trained as. So he helped us because we were innocent. We just didn't really quite know what we were doing. But and then over the years, Sid stayed at our home, or we had a lot of conferences here. And being around him is a little hard to describe, because he doesn't look like someone who you think would transform the world in the field of psychiatry and psychology. He's just a really ordinary guy. He had a great sense of humor. He was really funny. He had a very quiet mind. He seemed to kind of go through life at the speed of life. That's slowing down the speed of life is exactly what Sid did. He was so present and in the moment that being around him, it made me a little bit nervous at times, because it seemed like my brain was going a million miles an hour compared to his. And I would feel kind of, it made me self-conscious about how busy my own mind was, because he was so present. He wasn't judgmental about it or anything. He would just ask questions, or he'd just give you a look or tell a joke and just distract me from my thinking. And it would help me see, oh, it's just all caught up in this insecure thought. So, but the one most powerful experience with Sid was he was giving a talk in Torquay, England. And it was a beautiful conference. And afterwards, my wife and I, we were going to go to Ireland, because we'd never been to Ireland. And so we had invited Sid and Judy, his wife, to go with us. And so we spent a week in Ireland with them. And what was powerful about it was that he experienced everything so deeply. Like he'd walk through the little villages with them, and he would just notice little objects or things for sale or people where I was just kind of whizzing by going so fast. And he would just see everything like in slow motion almost. He would penetrate reality and really experience it and see so much beauty and so much. He had such a, it was so, every piece of food he ever ate, that was the best muffin I've ever had. That was the best cup of tea I've ever had. And he really meant it. It was like he was so able to take in life at such a deep level that's how he taught me the most, was just by his example and his presence. He was an extraordinarily present person. So that's what comes to my mind. So what are you guys doing there? How long have you guys been on your retreat?
Sorry, mate, I've just turned the microphone off and then I started to talk to you. I was just saying, thanks so much for that. That was beautiful. I was turning the microphone on and off during your talks. So there were things you were saying and there was responses in the room, but you obviously couldn't hear it. So no, that was really beautiful, that job. What was your question you just asked?
Oh, I was just wondering, how long have you guys been there, and that's your retreat? Is this your second day or?
First day.
Oh,
Day
your
one.
first day. Okay.
Hi.
So
Day one.
are you there for the whole weekend?
Yes. So we've got 2 more days.
Oh,
Yeah.
beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah.
You guys have a wonderful time.
We will, mate.
Two great facilitators there to work with. So I hope you enjoy it. Are all of you from England?
There's the odd one from Scotland.
Oh, well, that doesn't count.
Oh, you can't say that here, mate. Yeah.
Who's from Scotland there? They don't want you.
Yeah, I am English, but I've been there for 20 odd years now.
Oh no, you'll get away with it then. It's fine.
Where do you live in Scotland?
Edinburgh.
Oh, I love Edinburgh. My favorite place. Just love Edinburgh.
Yeah, it's
my good friend. We just took him to the airport 2 days ago. He's speaking at the conference in Glasgow on climate change.
Oh, brilliant.
Will Steger. I don't know if Dave, I've ever mentioned him. He's a Arctic and Antarctic explorer who's written a lot about climate change and has a program called Climate Generation. It's curriculums about climate in school systems all over the world.
Cool.
He's speaking there, and then he's going down to Antarctica and doing a bunch of talks for our national television station, the Good Morning America show, to talk about climate change. But he's was very excited to go to Glasgow.
It's suddenly got a very big topic, hasn't it?
Yeah, even I got a thing from another friend of mine the other day. Remember Donovan, the singer, who's from Glasgow? Yeah. He just created a rock opera for schools on climate change. And it's beautiful. It's really, really good. To kids put it on themselves. They design their own thing just to educate people about what's happening with the climate.
Cool. Oh, things are moving forward. I think that's the beautiful thing. I think this is the beautiful thing. I was a man who was never optimistic for our future. I was a man who dwelt in the pain of the future and the destruction of our future. And more, I believe we're heading in the right direction. And I think it's because of conversations like these. You know, we know the only way to change this world is to change the consciousness. It's all
Exactly.
created from it. It's all created from it.
Yeah.
And bit by bit, humanity's waking up.
Yeah, I agree. That's the real antidote. Because you know, working with people in the climate movement, you know, you can get just as caught up in antagonistic on that side, and you lose your bearings. You just alienate people, and so helping change agents be more conscious and see how to keep their bearings and their hope whilst we're facing a serious situation, but we don't have to be serious about it
Yeah,
to be effective.
absolutely.
And Joe, I was just going to say, if people wanted to find out more about you or get your books, what is your website?
Well, if you go to my website, joebailey&associates.com, there's all my past podcasts are there recorded for free, you know, to listen to. But also you can order the book, pre-order the book if you're in the UK, or you can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any book selling site. You can pre-order it on any of those as well. But if you go to my website, you'll learn more about what's in the book and be able to watch some of the podcasts and things, so you can get kind of a preview of what's in the book.
Perfect. We're going to write that down, Joe, so people can get access to that. So
All right, great. Thank you so much for asking me to speak to Jen and Dave.
no, thank you so much.
I was going to say, I think I met you in 2014, and Joe just gets younger, he doesn't get older. Every time I see you, he looks younger.
It's a filter. It's a Zoom filter, isn't it?
Oh yeah, this is my what do they call it in you know, the virtual reality machines, your avatar. This is my avatar. Yeah.
It's a good one. It's a pretty one, Joe. Joe, thank you so much, mate. Thank you so much for your time. That was really beautiful. And
Really good, and congratulations to you two on not only creating this conference, but creating a new baby.
hi. And we got married.
And you got married. Well, yeah, you know, whatever.
All happening. It's all happening. And send our love to Michael, please.
Oh, I will. Yeah, she's up in her. Michael just wrote a new book, and it'll be coming out pretty soon too. It's a book of her art and her poetry, and it is so beautiful. It's just really going to be beautiful.
I look forward to seeing that.
Yeah. All right. Well, have a wonderful weekend, everybody, and thank you for listening. Bye, Jen. Oh, hi. Hi there. Hello. What a nice room you've got there, too, and people in it.
Nice is your house.
Oh, look at them all. There's and even got a fireplace. I like the way that you lay it out there, Dave. Comfortable chairs, a fireplace.
Oh yeah, no, Mike didn't build this stuff. He made the chairs out like this. No, Joe, thank you so much, mate. Bless you.
Okay, well, you take good care.
Speak to you soon.
See you soon.
Take care, mate. Loads of love.